Hi guys, you're welcome to Lizama's Stitches. My name is Amaka. If you're yet to subscribe to this channel, please click on the subscribe button and subscribe. And also turn on the notification bell so that whenever I upload new videos, you'll be notified. In this tutorial, we are going to be learning how to draft an off-shoulder bustier. So let's get started. Now this is my dartless basic bodice pattern. I have a tutorial on how to draft a basic bodice pattern. I'm going to leave the link in the description box below so that you can check it out later in case you don't know how to draft a basic bodice pattern. Now I'm going to briefly explain what I did here. This is my neckline. My neck width is 3 inches and my neck depth is 3 inches. And this is my shoulder line. This is my shoulder line, which is also going to serve as the starting point. Now from this shoulder line, I came down by 1 inch and connected it to my neck line. Now this is my armhole curve and this is my chest point. Now this is my bust point. This is my under bust point. This is my waist line. This is my waist point and this is the seam allowance. So because this is an off shoulder bustier, I'm going to take my measurement. Now I'm going to come down from this starting point. I'm going to come down by 5 inches. Now this is optional. You can decide to use 6 inches, you can decide to use 7 inches, depending on how low you want your off shoulder to be. You can also use 4.5 inches, but I'm using 5 inches for my off shoulder. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to mark 5 inches here. And I'll connect it. Now I'm going to impute my dart. Now for me to do that, I'm going to need my bust span measurement. Now my bust span measurement is 8 inches. 8 divided by 2 gives you 4 inches plus half inch seam allowance because I'm going to join it together. I'm going to cut it. So after cutting it, I'll still need to join it together. So I need half inch seam allowance. That gives you 4.5 inches. So I'm going to mark 4.5 inches here. I'll mark it on the bust point. And I'll connect it. Now, on the shoulder point, on this shoulder line, I'm going to find the midpoint of this line. So this is the midpoint of this line. Now I'm going to connect this line to this line. Now the next thing I'm going to do is to impute my dart. Now I'm going to remove 2 inches dart from here. So now this is how I'm going to do it. I'm going to mark 1 inch on both sides of this line. So this is how I'm going to do it. I'm going to mark 1 inch here and I'll mark 1 inch. 1 inch here and 1 inch here. You see? So on the underbust, okay, let me label these lines. Now this is my chest point. This is my bust point. This is my underbust point. This is my waist point. And this is my seam allowance. Okay. Now, on the underbust point, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to remove 2 inches for my dart. So I'm going to mark 1 inch here and 1 inch here. So I have 2 inches here. Now I'm going to connect it. Okay. Now on this line, on this bust point, I'm going to go up by 1 inch. From this bust point, I'm going to go up by half inch and I'm going to come down by half inch. Okay. So I'm going to connect this point to this point and this point to this point with straight lines. Now I'm going to connect this point to this point and this point to this point with my curved ruler. So this is how I'm going to do it. I'm going to place my ruler this way. And for this one, I'll connect this point to this point, just like this. Now this one doesn't need to be too curvy, just with a slight curve. So the next thing I'm going to do, on this point, I'm going to remove 2 inches here for my dart. So I'm going to mark 1 inch in between. I'm going to mark 1 inch on both sides of this line. So I have 2 inches. Now I'm going to connect this point to this point and this point to this point. So I'm going to do it with my curved ruler. So I'm going to blend this point. So the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to take my horizontal measurement. I'm going to take my waist measurement on my waist point. Now my waist circumference is 32 inches. 32 divided by 4 gives you 8 inches. So I'm going to mark 8 inches on my waistline. So I'm going to mark 8 inches here. Now 8 inches plus these 2 inches which I'm going to remove for my dart, plus these 2 inches I'm going to remove for that, gives you 10 inches. You know, when I remove these 2 inches, I'll need to return it here. So 8 plus 2 gives you 10, plus this 1 inch which I'm going to use to join it together gives you 11 inches. So I'm going to mark 11 inches here. On the underbust point, I'm going to take my underbust circumference. I'm going to take my underbust measurement on my underbust on this line. My underbust circumference is 30 inches. 30 divided by 4 gives you 7.5 inches. So I'm going to mark 7.5 inches here. 7.5 inches plus 2 inches for this dart which I'm going to cut off from here gives you 9.5 inches, plus 1 inch which I'm going to use to join these two together gives you 10.5 inches. So I'm going to mark 10.5 inches on this line. Now on my chest point, I'm going to take my bust measurement on my chest point. Now my bust circumference is 38 inches. 38 divided by 4 gives you 9.5 inches. Plus this dart value that I'm going to cut off from here. Now this is 1/4. This is 1/4. 9.5 plus 1/4 gives you 9¾ plus 1 inch which I'm going to use to join this together gives you 10¾ So I'm going to mark 10¾ here. Now here these 2 inches I'm going to cut off from here. These 2 inches I'm going to cut off from here. I'm going to return it here. So I'll connect it. So now I'm going to connect this point to this point. To create a new armhole, I'm going to connect this point to this point with a slight curve. You know, this is off shoulder. When you're drafting an off shoulder pattern, the armhole shouldn't go inside. The armhole shouldn't go inside. Just what we need here is just a slight curve. So I'm going to do something like this. So we have a new armhole curve. So the same measurement I have here, now this same measurement I have here, I have 10¾ here. I'm going to also mark 10¾ on the bust point. So I'm going to connect these points together. So just like this, I'll connect these points. Now I'm also going to add my seam allowance, but this is optional. You can decide to add your allowance on your fabric. You can decide not to add your allowance on your pattern paper and you add it on your fabric, but I'm going to add my allowance on my pattern paper. So I'm using 1.5 inches seam allowance, and I'll connect it. Now, one more thing. If you want your off shoulder to have a sweetheart neckline, all you need to do is to come down by either 1 inch or 1.5 inches from this line. Let me show you how to do it. You come down by 1.5 inches. Let me use 1.5 inches. 1.5 inches. You can use 1 inch. You can use half inch. It all depends on what you want. Okay. So now I'm going to connect this point to this point. So now I'm going to join these two parts together. You see that the two are no longer the same. You see that this line and this line, they are no longer the same. So I'm going to blend it together so that when I'm sewing, it will still be equal after sewing. After cutting, it will still be equal. Now I'm going to cut it. If you want to use a sweetheart neck, if you want your off shoulder to have sweetheart neckline, you're going to cut from here. But I'm maintaining this line. So this is the front panel. Now this is the front panel. Now this is, I'm going to cut this on fold. I'm going to cut one of these and I'll cut two of this. So I'll keep it aside. This is my back panel. I'm going to briefly explain what I did here. Now this is my zipper allowance. My zipper allowance is 1.5 inches. Now every measurement I'm taking, I'm going to take away from this zipper. I'm going to take it from this line, Now this is my neckline. My back neck width is 3 inches and the neck depth is 1 inch. And this is my shoulder point, which is also going to serve as my starting point. My shoulder line is, now from this shoulder point, I came down by 1 inch for my shoulder slant, which I connected to the neck width, which I connected to the neckline. Now this is my armhole curve, this is my chest point, this is my waist point, and this is my seam allowance. So let me label it. This is my chest point, this is my waist point, and this is my seam allowance. So the next thing I'm going to do, now for my off shoulder, for my off shoulder, I'm going to come down by 5 inches, just the same way I did on the front panel. So I'm going to mark 5 inches from here. So I'm marking 5 inches again. And I'll connect it. I'm going to impute my dart. Now for me to do that, I'll be working with my bust span measurement. My bust span measurement is 8 inches. 8 divided by 2 gives you 4 inches plus half inch seam allowance, which I'm going to use to join the two together because I'll be cutting this. I'll be cutting it open. So that gives you 4.5 inches. So I'm going to mark 4.5 inches from this line. I'm going to mark 4.5 inches. I'll mark it on the chest point and I'll connect it. So the next thing I'm going to do now on this shoulder line, I'm going to find the midpoint of this line. Now the midpoint of this line, this is the midpoint of this line. And I'll connect it. I'll connect this point to this point. now I'm going to impute my dart. Now for the back panel, I'll be removing 1 inch for my dart. Now I'm going to mark ½ inch in between. I'm going to mark ½ inch on both sides of this line. Now from the chest point, I'm going to come down by 1 inch. And I'll connect this point to this point and this point to this point. So the next thing I'm going to do is to take my horizontal measurement. Now my waist circumference on my waist point, I'm going to take my waist measurement on my waist point. My waist circumference is 32 inches. 32 divided by 4 gives you 8 inches. Plus this 1 inch, which I'm going to cut off for my dart because I'll need to return it here. That gives you 9 inches. Plus 1 inch, which I'm going to use to join these two together, gives you 10 inches. So I'm going to mark 10 inches here. So on the chest point, I'm going to take my bust measure. On the chest point, I'm going to take my bust measurement on the chest point. Now my bust circumference is 38 inches. 38 divided by 4 gives you 9.5 inches. 9.5 inches plus 1 inch. I'm going to cut this line. So 1 inch, which I'm going to use to join the two together, gives you 10.5 inches. So I'm going to mark 10.5 inches here. And I'll connect it. On this point, I'm going to eliminate my zipper budge. So on this point, I'm going to mark 3/4 inch. So I'm going to connect this point to this point, just like this. And from here, I'm going to mark 3/4 inch from this line. And I'm going to connect it to this point. So now this line is no longer useful to me. So this is my new zipper allowance. I'm going to add my seam allowance. And I'll connect it. So from here, now because I'm going to cut this point, the 1 inch which I'm going to use to join this together, I'm going to return it here. I'm going to use 1 inch to join here together because I'm going to cut this line. So I'm going to use 1 inch to join this. So I'm returning it here. And I'll connect it to this point. I'm going to cut it. So this is the front and this is the back. If you found this tutorial helpful, please give this video a thumbs up. Share this video with your friends. Share this video in your sewing groups. Subscribe to my channel to support me. Subscription is free. Feel free to follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Lizama Stitches. We've come to the end of this tutorial. Thanks for watching. See you in my next video. Bye.